On the podcast today, we are going to speak about chapter 70 of the Tao Te Ching, which makes up the 70th episode of the 81 meditations on the Tao Te Ching. And as usual, Guyong will read Jia Fu Feng and Jane English's translation, and I will read Derek Lin's translation.
My words are easy to understand and easy to perform, yet no one under heaven knows them or practices them. My words have ancient beginnings. My actions are disciplined. Because people do not understand, they have no knowledge of me. Those that know me are few. Those that abuse me are honored. Therefore the wise wear rough clothing and hold a jewel in their heart.
My words are easy to understand, easy to practice. The world cannot understand, cannot practice. My words have basis. My actions have principle. People do not understand this. Therefore they do not understand me. Those who understand me are few. Thus I am highly valued. Therefore the sage wears plain clothes, but holds jade. So in this chapter, Lao Tzu is expressing a type of spiritual isolation he feels due to being in harmony with the Tao and understanding the world from a higher perspective, as he expresses in this chapter that those who understand him are few, right? And a lot of us will experience this on the spiritual path, a type of maybe spiritual loneliness, so to speak. But it all comes about by aligning yourself with the Tao and having this heightened sense of intelligence, so to speak, and a deeper perception of reality.
Yes, that isolation and loneliness as a sage or as just an individual who see the reality from a different perspective, which is often from a higher point of view. It's hard to understand from the ordinary people's perspective to those kind of sage or those spiritual individual, because they often seem to live in a very metaphysical, philosophical world, right? And therefore, sometimes they misjudge them as they are kind of stupid or dull or something like that. Actually, Lao Tzu explains in the earlier chapter 20, in a little bit different but kind of a similar things that he wants to share through the Tao Te Ching. So he is saying, I'm dull, I'm stupid, while other people seem very clever, very sharp, but I'm silly and like this, right? So yes, it's hard to follow them and understand them in a very logical and material sense, of course, but because the sages are living the world beyond the dualism, beyond the separation. So that is actually where the loneliness come from. Like you said, maybe some of our audience will feel the same way, because once they have taken this path of spirituality, people often seem, like something's off about you, something wrong with you. Yes. Only because these people just don't understand what you know, really, So it's somewhat, sometimes it feels a bit like a burdensome, I think, because that burden only comes to you, and you the only one who feel that burden somewhat. No one else will really feel. Because people don't understand where you come from, right? So that burden is something that you need to carry, but that's something that it comes with from you taking this path of knowledge.
There is a lot of research out there about, how intelligent people often become more lonely than less intelligent people. And, we can see obviously why that is, right? Because if you have a heightened intelligence, you see reality at a higher level, at a deeper level a lot of the time. And when we talk about the Eastern spiritual traditions, these paths are what I would say are intelligent spirituality, right? They are not like New Age, right? New Age spirituality is kind of like, wishy-washy, weak spiritual tenets, right? It's kind of like feel-good spirituality. It doesn't really challenge your own life. It kind of makes you feel good. It's kind of like the spirituality that came out of the counterculture movement, right? Like that's kind of like what New Age spirituality is, where it's a kind of over-sensationalizing of the Eastern spiritual traditions, making it, more weak in the sense that the you're not sticking to the knowledge. It doesn't have a strong basis, right? So it's like a lot of the knowledge is kind of the deeper knowledge of the Eastern spiritual tradition is pushed aside, the more complex, and then it becomes more flaky, more easy to understand, like fast food, right? It's not like a really solid meal. Like, for example, if you were going to study Vedanta, right? It's a solid meal. But then people can take certain elements of Vedanta out, turn it into kind of this New Age spirituality where it's easy for a lot of people to understand. And Lao Tzu's not talking about that. He's talking about this intelligent spirituality, which Taoism is at its core, at its innate tradition, not the flaky Taoism that we find, got the flow, dude, and all of these sorts of things. Not that, the depth of Taoism, right? He's talking about that. And so what often happens, and like you said, our audiences probably experience this as well, is that when you follow this intelligent spirituality, which is based on tradition, a lot of people will kind of distance themselves from you. And we've all experienced that on the spiritual path, right? Where New Age spirituality, actually, you'll see a lot of people in New Age spirituality, they get in groups and they make friends and this and that. It's not that you're not going to make friends in the traditional sphere, but it's a lot harder because there's less people, as Lao Tzu is alluding to, that are truly invested in this and who are aligned with the Tao. And so what you'll see is people will distance themselves from you. And we've all experienced this, right? We've experienced it with family members, with friends. They will just distance themselves from you because an interesting thing with humans is that humans are okay to accept if someone has more physical prowess, right? Like, so if someone's better at football or basketball than them, you can kind of accept that because that's their kind of, maybe they're a bigger person, they have more innate talents. But where humans have a flaw is they can't handle when someone is more intelligent. They can't handle the psychological sphere. And so once someone's more intelligent, then you'll see this distancing because people feel like innately threatened by that. And it's kind of a real sense of weakness in an individual. So for those listening and watching, you need to be also cognizant of yourself doing that, right? Like if someone appears more intelligent and then you start to speak about them behind their back or scorn them or make fun of them or, like in the New Age spiritual sphere, oh, there's too many words, you're speaking too many words, you don't know the truth. That's a way of trying to cancel and shut down an individual who's just smarter than them. And we get that on the channel all the time, right? And so I often say to those people, look, our channel is based on the traditional spiritual teachings. If you're interested in New Age teachings where you can all parrot the same things and pat each other on the back as if everyone else is lesser than you, then there are plenty of channels for that, right? So you have to be cognizant of that trait. Am I reacting because someone is more intelligent than me? Do I have that kind of mass sickness that people have? Because remember, there's two spheres of life, right? In this manifest world, there's physical and psychological. We can often handle the physical, like I said. We can see a good soccer player and we can say, well, I'm not going to be Cristiano Ronaldo overnight, that's for sure. or is it even possible, right? Like so you can fundamentally accept that. But as Lao Tzu is saying, like if Lao Tzu existed in this day and age, everyone would be like, oh, that guy, like he thinks he's all that and this and that, just because he has a deeper sense of reality and he can understand the world at a deeper level. And some people can't, and as he alludes to in this chapter, most people can't, and there's only really a few that can understand him.
Yeah, that's where the loneliness come from, isn't it? Because unfortunately, most of people come from that weak mentality and then having somewhat like an inferiority complex almost, so that when they get to see someone who seems to be more intelligent and more articulate in their speech and this and that, then they feel inferior and they come back and try to tear them apart, right? And that is a sign of weakness. And in the end, just like Lao Tzu himself or spiritual aspirants like ourselves and the audience become the victim of that, right? And again, it's not our responsibility to teach them how things are. That's everyone has to go through their own individual path of evolution. If not this lifetime, maybe they have to go through many lifetimes until they learn a few things, right?
Mm-mm.
And again, everyone is taking different journey in their life, and everyone's life pan out differently. But it is our responsibility to learn from what we go through in our lives, right? And like you said, even IQ test and these things that people don't believe in, that sort of stuff, but. Not that IQ test is like an end result that you are a smart person or not smart person. It's nothing to do with it, but it's just one way to kind of test someone's just purely like, let's say, the logical side of your intellectual level, right? And in that sense, people need to pay some kind of credit to it. But some people think that our IQ is made from like white person and is a racist, and it's kind of a ridiculous argument and things like that. Again, people always have to, for some reason, they have to say something on some sort of ideology or even philosophy, knowledge. They always feel that they need to have a say, right? That is definitely come from a place where you're very unintelligent. And also, very weak. The mentality is very weak. They can't take the fact that you know less, right? If you can't take that, how can you evolve?
That's right.
Right? We know that we can't know everything, right? Everyone is good at different things. Hence, people know different things better than the others. That's why we share the knowledge. That's how we evolve.
Sure.
And that's just how things are.
That's right.
And people go on a YouTube and watch a big video and they comment on everything and criticizing everything, and just to make them sound better than what's been said on the video and things like that, as if their opinion will be counted, like. It's quite the other way. It looks silly. It looks stupid. Like, it's better to just not say anything, in a sense. I mean, your existence is not that important or special. You know what I mean? So people need to understand that. And for a bit of an extreme example, for someone who were in the kind of position as like Lao Tzu, it's like Julius Evola, who was a scholar philosopher in the early 1900s. He's Italian, and he's a very strong advocate of traditionalism. When he was in 20s, he already had a different sensibility of the world, and he was already quite intelligent at that age. From how he perceived the world. So he had a strong figures in his life that he was following. These two people. I don't really remember their names, but they were as smart as anyone at that time, and they were highly educated academic philosophers who saw the world in a very sad way. Because of what we're talking about here, the isolation of being, more intelligent and seeing the bigger picture of the world, right? So Evola followed those two individuals, and those two individuals he followed actually ended up killing themselves, both of them in their 20s and early 30s, like this. So Evola himself also actually, I don't think that inspired him in a way, but he had thought about ending his own life in his 20s. But I think around that time, that's when he found the knowledge of Vedanta and Eastern tradition, and that's kind of gave him a reason to live in a way. So, but the thing is, nowadays we hear a few times that someone killed themselves, but they're very highly intelligent in the Buddhist philosophy and this and that. And again, we don't know entire story of those individuals or what they're really going through, other than being lonely. They had maybe legitimate reason why they had to make that kind of decision. But it is to show that how difficult it is at times to follow their path and keep their practice solid, because it can get sometimes very difficult. And like you said, you get ignored by your family members or close friends in a certain brutal way, and you gave them so much love and so much care for them, but in the end they just got a knife on your back kind of situation. I guess we have all experienced in certain different degrees, but yeah, it can be that difficult.
To what you said, and we've spoken about this numerous times on the podcast, about listening and learning, having that humility to listen and learn is a real great, good character trait, right? You beautifully said that we all can't know everything. So when you understand that you all can't know everything, what should be your approach to life? You should have the humility to listen and learn. And it's such a poor trait, and I find it, like we were mentioning with the New Age spirituality, they have an inability to listen and learn because they may have heard some sort of aphorism, or they may have heard some sort of slogan, and they just live by that. Like, go with the flow, right? Just go with the flow. That becomes like this mantra, and it's like, yeah, but go with the flow comes from Taoism, and it's much more complex than that, and it's there's a depth to it. That's a bit weak. Like, just go with the flow, right? And you see this all the time. Like, I watched a beautiful lecture with Swami Sarvapriyananda the other week, and after watching, it was a great lecture, and I went to the comments just to have a look, and a lot of the Indians with the pranam emojis, and then there was this Westerner. Too much word salad, Swami. And it's like, just because you don't understand does not give you the right to try and tear someone down. Admit you don't understand. You're not on his level. He is a modern authority on Advaita Vedanta. It's okay. It's okay to take the low road. And if anything in the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu is trying to teach us that it's okay to take that low road. You don't know as much as Swami Sarvapriyananda. And it's okay. The reason why he's there is to facilitate knowing, right? The reason why our podcast is here is to facilitate understanding on the Tao Te Ching. That's what it's all about. Having that quality to listen and learn is a good character trait. You don't have to always defend your lack of intelligence. We all lack intelligence in a certain respect, and if once we understand that, then we're able to listen and learn and then grow. And Taoism is a path of, in some sense, of continual growth, because if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So, but you need to have that humility to listen and learn.
In that situation, that person sounds very rude, actually. You don't say that to anyone who trying to teach the knowledge, really, and then just come up and say too much word salad, Swami. That's very, it's very basic etiquette is not learned yet as an adult person.
Yep.
And that's very disappointing, and it's shameful too. And humility is, like you said, it's very important. Actually, the most fundamental values that you should carry and also you should practice. I think that if you want to learn, especially philosophy and wisdom traditions, without humility, you're not even qualified to go near the book, I don't think. Because the wisdom tradition is teaching you only to be humble. Over and over and over again. Whatever you read the Dhammapada, you read Tao Te Ching, Upanishad, you can just go on and read all these books. All these books basically telling you to be humble.
That's right.
And if you can't even practice that, if you can't stay quiet and bite your tongue and being able to listen to someone, then it's big character flaw, really.
100%.
And unfortunately, we see too many cases like that these days. But in their case, again, the humility is a sign of how strong person you are as well. Like, you are okay to, stay quiet, and you're okay to learn things from someone who know more, which is actually, even you need to lower yourself to learn something. It kind of sounds ridiculous, right? You just should be able to learn things.
Well, people ask us all the time, how did we learn all of this traditional knowledge and this and that? Because we just shut up and learned. Like I was just a young kid from Mackay, North Queensland in Australia. Like, what would I know? I didn't grow up in Varanasi. I didn't grow up, in Kasar or somewhere like this.
In a Brahmin family.
Yeah. So my mentality was always listen and learn because I know nothing. And, over time, you start to know things because you have that mentality of listening and learning, right? You have to have that humility. It's such a strength, which is considered in the modern day a weakness, and it is not. If you're in the game of trying to save face online all the time, like what you said, it's highly immature and rude. The way that this type of social media communication has evolved over time, because I can tell you, when I first started around social media around 2011, the type of communication then to now is completely different. People speak to each other in a very forthright way, in a very rude way. So what has happened slowly over time with people who are not cognizant and, let's say, maybe less intelligent, is that they've inculcated this type of cowardice, right? And it's an accepted cowardice, and people all accept this cowardice online. And so I said to someone the other day, I said, I just don't practice that type of social media communication. If someone's going to say something like that to me, that's not how I do things. I deal with things in the real world in a different way, right? And most of those people wouldn't say those things anyway, right? So because the cowardly person has strength behind many, many screens. And so getting back to what we were speaking about with the Eastern spiritual traditions, the actual traditional knowledge, is that when you're invested in that, it's really only that, right? You're invested in the teachings, understand it, you're absorbed in it. The difference with, as you see with New Age spirituality, is New Age spirituality, people often, it's lip service, but then they're highly political. And they have usually one political leaning, right? Because they have misunderstood that Eastern spirituality is some sort of moral-based system when it's about the higher knowledge, right? And this unfortunately happened through the counterculture movement. And so New Age spirituality takes this on board, puts it on their shoulders, and tries to carry this so-called morality, which is actually just driven by certain tech companies and media companies. And so they actually get bamboozled by this, where Lao Tzu would see it at a deeper level. He'd know the game that's being played, obviously has a distance because he's not politically oriented. And so the difference is, as I said, with traditional-based people, like people who are invested truly in spirituality, is they keep a distance from a lot of that worldly stuff. As you mentioned the Buddha, right? Buddha spoke about this, and he kind of mentioned people as worldlings. Like if we translate it into English, like from Pali, like these worldlings, right? And worldlings are interested in a lot of things that are happening in the world, the dramas in the world. And so New Age spirituality is just lip service spirituality infused with the worldling mentality, right? And so the Eastern spiritual traditions, the traditional knowledge, is a complete investment in that tradition, in that knowledge that has been passed down. So if we're talking about Taoism here, we're talking about the ancients even further than Lao Tzu and Chuang-Tzu, right? Like Lao Tzu and Chuang-Tzu mentioned the ancients from their perspective.
Yes.
So we're going back who knows when, right? We look at Lao Tzu and Chuang-Tzu as the ancients, but then so we're part of this continual lineage when we follow the traditional knowledge. And there's actually a strength and a real beauty in following those lineages.
Absolutely. New Age movement of today is actually completely opposite to what the actual ancient philosophy is teaching, really. Ancient philosophy is teaching to be impartial. The impartiality in Tao Te Ching, of course, Zhuangzian, yes, even Buddhism, yes, and Vedanta, yes. It's just not taking a side. It's just to be neutral and see the value from the both sides and not taking any side. That is the teaching. And the New Age movement, that's why I'd like to say movement, because it is a movement based on some sort of ideology. Their ideology is to be politically correct and follow by their own moral values, which is completely partial, and them trying to be Buddhist, them trying to be spiritual and pious and all this, that's just absurd, and which is completely the opposite from this ancient philosophy.
That's right. It is a strange phenomenon, like you said, that type of partiality, because when you understand the Eastern spiritual traditions, you're always being implored to have this impartial view of the world. So I always find it strange, and I get a lot of heat on the channel for mentioning these things because it is the truth and it affects a lot of people in a different way. Like, people will say, oh, he doesn't like a certain group of people. Again, they're speaking through a moralistic framework where they have this hyper-compassion, like Evola mentioned, that is very weak and porous, because as soon as you poke them, that compassion turns to anger, right? And so then they don't have compassion for me, which is ironic, right? Because the compassion of the Buddha is for everybody.
That's right.
Right? So, and the Buddha did speak negatively about ordinary people all the time. Obviously, New Age spirituality don't want to speak about this because it affects their weak type of ideology. But he did mention worldlings, and the reason why is because we have, I mean, you've got to get out of this idea of right and wrong, good and bad. See, that's the problem with New Age spirituality. They're still in this perspective of right and wrong, good and bad. Most of the greatest spiritual teachers of all time were very forthright, were very frank in how they spoke, right? And so you knew where you stood, and as you should as well. And so you want to, if for those listening and watching, if you're around those sorts of circles, you kind of want to distance yourself from that, because you're only going to end up in these type of spiritual cul-de-sacs, psychological cul-de-sacs, where everyone's trying to virtue signal and be better than everyone else. And then it lacks humility, and it lacks like a deeper sense of a connection to the actual tradition.
Yes.
It becomes a materialist-based spirituality.
Materialist-based and very unintelligent. And they have a strong agenda to persuade other people. And they trying to prove they are wrong. Again, they're right, I mean. So again, the right and wrong way of thinking, to trying to prove a point how they are right and others are wrong, right? But it's, that's not what any of these ancient knowledge is teaching. And yes, completely the opposite.
And so, obviously, if you're interested in the Eastern spiritual traditions, as we speak about with Taoism on this podcast and on my channel, those who are usually invested in this knowledge find themselves in a lonely place, right? A lot of people who follow New Age spirituality, they're all singing Kumbaya together. There's a big group dynamic, unless you don't fall in line with how they think, and then you're thrown under the bus. But if you're following the traditional knowledge, there is a sense of loneliness. And look, you can actually sense this even in places such as India. Like someone who is really invested in Vedanta, they find themselves in this type of lonely place, right? Like, as opposed to what the masses would ordinarily do.
Yes.
So I think there's actually a type of strength in that loneliness. I think a lot of people think about that loneliness in too much of a negative light. I always wondered why I always wanted to be alone when I was younger and this and that. You're young, you don't really know, right? Like, I obviously had friends, but sometimes you felt just more comfortable being alone. But having friends is wonderful. It's great if you have that connection, especially on that deeper level. But I would say that it's not a negative thing for people, and people need to realize that it's not a negative thing. It's actually a positive thing if you can be lonely, or lonely in air quotes, right? The thing is, you don't have a sense of loneliness. You might be isolated in the way that you think, and you're obviously not going to go to work tomorrow and start talking about the 70th chapter of the Tao Te Ching to people, right? But you gain strength from understanding this knowledge, from knowing this knowledge. You're connected to something much deeper than your average job, or than even your friendships, right? You're connected to this lineage where, let's say, millions and billions of people have been a part of all throughout history.
Yes, these chapters, like chapter 70, chapter 20, Lao Tzu talking about his position in the world and speaking of how alone he is and he feels isolated and this and that, is that like a journey for all of us to take. I think a little bit like a hero's journey somewhat. At the beginning of the journey, that you were one of them, let's say, one of the general public who weren't very sensitive, not very sensible to what's happening around you or the world and to yourself. But once you find that some sort of interest in this kind of knowledge and you start finding some flaws around in the world and the people, then you start wonder about things, right? And that's how we often get into this kind of knowledge, because we want to find some sort of answers, right? Why the world is where it is, why the people are where they are, and why am I different, this kind of position. And then you get into this knowledge and you follow it, practice it very sincerely, and soon you kind of witness slowly how your friends and family are slowly kind of distancing, keep a distance from you in sometimes very visibly, sometimes not, right? And you find yourself being alone, and in that initial process, it can make you feel strong sense of loneliness somewhat, like why is this happening to me? Is it really something wrong with me or something wrong with them? Either way, why is this happening? I feel very lonely, feel very betrayed by these people and whatnot. But in that situation, that you can easily fall back to be with these people, or you can continue to take this journey, right? If you do continue to take your journey, it's kind of, like you said, that loneliness becomes part of your strength. And after a certain time, you actually want to be distanced from people. You voluntarily choose to be alone and to be away from people. Why? Because a lot of the times we learn that the people often to be toxic. We know it, right? And often they want to tear you down and, say rude things and make you feel extremely bad and sad. And so you want to be alone and you want to pursue your passion in this path of learning in depth of this kind of knowledge, and while other people keep distance from you, and you just get wiser and wiser and more intelligent, and you will learn to see the world differently, including yourself. So it's like a journey. If you take it that way, it's not all negative thing. And again, the people who drop away from you are the weak people, are unintelligent people. And also they may not deserve you in their life. We see it that way. Then it becomes your strength, and it will only help you and guide you in a way along your journey.
That's right. Lao Tzu says, "Those who understand me are few, thus I am highly valued." So if you stick to that concept in this chapter about holding that jade within, even though you look ordinary on the outside, you look like a normal person. You are actually a normal, you don't look like an alien or something like that. You're a normal person, but you have this jade within, and that becomes what you protect, right? You could care less about, how you look externally and this and that, but you have this, let's say, secret, right? You have the Holy Grail within that a lot of people are not cognizant of in a materialist-based world where spirituality is on death's row, right? But you yourself have the jade, and you need to protect that jade, no matter what happens in the world, right? No matter what. No matter if you're lonely or you have a lot of people around you or whatever. Lao Tzu is imploring us to hold to that, stick to that.
That's right.
It doesn't matter what you look like on the outside.
Yes, so Derek Lin mentions as a plain clothes. Here in my translation says rough clothing. So that is to indicate that how Lao Tzu cared so much less about how he looked, right, or what he was wearing. And in Islam tradition, the Islam mystics we call Sufi, and I mean apparently the Sufi originally actually meant people who were wearing like really thick and rough clothes that was made by the sheep hair or something like that. So that is to show how these mystical people, spiritual people, often they were poor, right? Like a story in the Zhuangzi, the same. Like people were on the street, seeing him walking down the street, and don't you have some better clothes to wear? You know, like because all the clothes are all torn apart and dirty, and so often these people, like we see in the stories, that they were poor, and what they were wearing or how they looked was the last of their worries. Quite opposite from New Age people, right?
Yeah.
They all about how they look, but these true spiritual aspirants weren't about the appearance. It's all about what's inside. Again, that the jewel, the jade within their hearts, within our hearts, that's what's actually really important.
That's right. Well, you don't have to look no further than Ramana Maharshi to see.
He had no clothes.
Just no clothes, just wore a loincloth. And even if you go to India, there's just sadhus who don't wear any clothes. But it is an important thing to remember. Like if you focus too much on the external world and you're neglecting the spiritual treasure that you have within, right? And look, in some sense, it has a good effect on you as well if you don't care too much. Obviously, you want to be presentable. I mean, you don't want to go too far with that type of idea. I mean, in Stoicism, they have a perspective. And it's actually a type of spiritual practice where you wear strange clothing because people look at you differently. It kind of hurts your ego. So you're training your ego not to care so much about, how you look and who you are as a person, in air quotes, because what's important is the jade, right? And so in all the stories you mentioned, like the Zhuangzi, for example, Zhuangzi doesn't care what people think about him. He's elevated to that level that he doesn't care what someone's perspective of him is on the psychological and physical level. He could care less because he knows the Tao. He's at one with the Tao. What else could define him? This is going to come and go. But his knowledge is going to live on, and we're going to still speak about it thousands of years later, which is an important takeaway for all of us. And that takeaway is that if we hold to that jade, if we continue to hold to that jade, we will be one with the ultimate. And being one with the ultimate, how could you have that sense of loneliness, right? Because you are one with everything. And so sometimes we have to move away from those who neglect us and who scorn us and so forth and so on to harness that jade more so that you don't have that sense of loneliness again because you're one with the Tao. Okay, guys, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next time.